This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Someone who is interested in modelers in quite a big way, and obviously a big part of what I do involves modelers of all kinds, whether it's the HX Stomp, the fractal stuff, whether it's the Neural DSP Quad Cortex, whatever it is. And I don't really have any proper links to these companies. I just do this stuff because it's interesting to me and it's something that, for whatever reason, I like to nerd out on a bit. One of the things that I think is the number one sort of challenge with this stuff is getting a sound that can work for you live and translating what I think most of us over time can start to get reliably good results with our home rigs, whatever those might be. So for me personally, I use JBL LSR 305 speakers. That's what I hear this stuff through. Those are just, you know, bog standard studio monitors, not expensive particularly, sort of budget end-ish studio monitors. Now, the things that you are told as conventional wisdom, I think these days, is that generally you need an FRFR monitor. Now, the first time I remember hearing about this stuff, there was a company, I think they still make stuff, Atomic, and they made these little cabinets with like a cutout for the pod bean to go into, and this would amplify that and give you essentially what was supposed to be something like the flat response of studio monitors, but in a louder kind of cabinet that could work live. Now, this has become, I think, a bit of a norm, and I think FRFR has been a bit of a thing that's been pushed around as a thing that you need to do. In this video, I'm going to share with you my thoughts on why that might not necessarily be the only option. And there are certainly folks out there that get results without going down that route. And for me personally, I've tried a couple of these options, and personally myself at the moment, what I find just as pleasing is using either going into the return of a tube amp, or at the moment I've been gigging with a Henriksen Bud, which has an active EQ on it. Just plug into the front of that. That's a solid state little amp. And you can then plug from an external cab and that, which I use a Mesa Boogie speaker with EVM 12s in it. That's me. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, and I'm not telling you this is the only way to do it or is the right way or wrong way, but there are some other options that you should consider before I think you spend necessarily money going down the FRFR route. I would spend a little bit of time working with what you've got if you do have something already that could do this job. So as I say, I can plug into the back of a Mesa Boogie. This is what I've been trying, Mesa Boogie Nomad, and I just left the IR or cabs on, and oddly enough, that was as good as an experience that I've had with anything else. What I find really difficult with this stuff is that because you dial things in at home at a certain volume, there's a guy called Fletcher Munson, he's got curves. When you turn things up louder, sometimes you find, oh, this is not exactly what I expected, and getting involved with the band as well. So what I found is that the Mesa Boogie Nomad, if I leave the speaker simulations on, at least as I turn it up, it doesn't get super, super spiky, which is the thing which really puts me off. I think maybe I'm a little bit oversensitive to like really trebly noises. I kind of like darker stuff. So that for me was the reason I quite like the actual guitar amp. The other thing that I have a feeling with is that involving a tweeter in guitar tone or a coaxial speaker, I think introduces a thing that we are not, if we're looking for that real amp type experience, which is, I guess, part of why you might want to explore this route anyway. The tweeter, I think, is a little bit of an enemy to our usual guitar tones. If you've looked up kind of guitar speaker efficiency, there is a drop off after generally around 5K. And what the tweeter is going to do is effectively get rid of that inefficiency. So an FRFR speaker is going to generate tones with brighter top ends than an equivalent, guitar speaker would be able to. And although things like the power cab can emulate these speaker frequencies and stuff and the speaker models, for me personally, I've just found just turning off that tweeter altogether got me closer to what I was looking for. The Henriksen Bud also has a tweeter on-off switch. I turn it off all the time. I don't want, especially with higher gain tones, there to be all of this kind of high gain fizzy stuff. And I think equally on an amp, I tend to run treble and presence relatively low. I'm someone who's a bit sensitive to this high-end stuff. So that's something to say. The other thing you could consider is whether before trying the FRFR stuff, if there's a slightly cheaper option that you could experiment with. If you have an existing guitar cab, but maybe you don't have an amp or anything suitable anymore, there are things like the Orange Pedal Baby and the Seymour Duncan Power Stage, and Harley Benton made the GPA 100, which Chris has of mine. Now these are all sort of solid state power amps, the similar sort of things to what you get in the Laney FRFR and in the Line 6 Power Cab anyway. They're just solid state amplifiers essentially. What's useful about those is that you've got some EQ on there, and I think it is a good idea, especially for this live stuff, to have like a little quick coarse adjustment that you can make. Oh, I don't need that much high end, or the mids are a bit missing, or the bass is a bit woofy, so you just got like a 3-point, I can just make some adjustments. I do like that as an idea. If I didn't already have something that was working for me, that might be what I'd explore. The slight negative I find to the FRFR concept is that you've got something which is essentially amp shaped and amp sized and the weight of an amp, but I haven't found it to be quite as enjoyable as a real amp. So if I'm going as far as taking this thing, then why am I not just taking a real amp? It's been my experience, because essentially you're getting something close to that experience. Certainly with the power cab, that's what it's trying to emulate. That's why they've put a coaxial speaker in something like a guitar cab, or the Laney full Reneg flat response LFR. The idea of that is to be built like a guitar cab, stick a coaxial speaker in it, and essentially the thinking is if you suspend a speaker within a real cab, then you should get something a bit more like the real cab response. And I know David Beebe is a huge fan of the Laney stuff, and it's not that badly priced. So I think that might be where I would start off. Also the power cab, I think some people really, really like that stuff. I've had one, I don't use it anymore. just because I found that I was more easily, with less tweaking, just able to get the actual thing that I'm looking for with either plugging into the back of a real amp or plugging in front of a solid state amp and into a cab. That was for me. I didn't have to then turn off IRs or cabs or anything like that. I could just rock up and be fairly confident that it's going to sound roughly like what I get in my studio, or at least what I'm wanting to hear, without having to worry about spiky top end or worrying about just things sounding crap. That's been my experience. The other thing is to bear in mind that there are chaps out there like Tosin Abasi, Aaron Marshall from Intervals, if you're watching Aaron, hello, and a bunch of other people, I think Pliny used to do it, who actually just plug, because they get provided backline for their shows, they plug their modelers into the return of a dual rectifier. I think that was the case for a few of those, at least for a while. Turn the cabs off and then it runs out to your cab. So certainly I think there is a million ways to try this, and I would say try the cheapest options that you've already got hold of before you go down the route of buying some of the more expensive stuff. I'm not saying not to do that eventually, but you may find that what you've already got might work. But some of the FRFR stuff is quite an expensive option, I think, and I don't necessarily think it might not be totally what you're looking for. So if someone tells you this is 100% the best way to do it, then you could say, well, why are Tosin, why are Aaron doing it in other ways? It might be because maybe FRFR isn't the only solution to get this job done. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you had good experience with FRFR or not? I know some folks really like the headrush stuff as well, which is an even cheaper option again. Some people don't like it. Some people are happy to just use a PA speaker, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a case of knowing what you're going for and knowing what you're going to get. It's what I use. People have asked about it again. It's that Henriksen Bud, and then I've got an external guitar speaker with an EVM 12 in it, in case I need to really make a lot of noise.